Imagine you're standing in a crowded medieval market. Coins are clinking, merchants are shouting prices, and somewhere in the noise a tax collector is calmly taking a share. Not because he hates the merchants, but because the kingdom needs money, and this is the easiest place to find it. Now, fast forward. The clothes change. The buildings get taller. The coins become paper, then digits. But the core problem stays stubbornly the same. Governments need revenue to run a state, pay soldiers, build roads, fund schools, respond to crises, and keep the whole machine from stalling. And when a government needs money, it has two choices. It can ask openly, or it can build systems where the payment happens quietly, automatically, almost invisibly. Here's where the story gets interesting. Because most of the financial tricks people talk about aren't cartoon villain plots where leaders sit in a dark room saying, "How do we keep everyone broke?" That's not how real history works. History is more practical than that. It's usually incentives. A state needs steady income. Voters don't love taxes. Economies are messy. Wars happen. Famines happen. Banks fail. Prices spike. Politicians inherit problems they didn't create, and they still need solutions by next Tuesday. So over centuries, governments across the world developed a playbook. Some tools are fair. Some are blunt. Some help stability. Some shift costs onto people who don't notice until it's too late. And the reason this matters isn't because you should hate government as a concept. The reason it matters is because these systems shape your daily life in a way most people never stop to map out. Have you ever looked at your paycheck and thought, wait, where did it all go? Have you ever saved money for months and somehow it feels like the finish line keeps moving? What if the problem isn't only your habits, but also the rules of the game? In this video, we're going on a historical journey from ancient empires to early central banks to the modern era. Not to fuel paranoia, but to understand incentives. We'll look at the most common financial mechanisms states have used to raise money, manage debt, and control the economy, and how those same mechanisms can quietly squeeze ordinary people if you don't understand them. And the goal isn't to make you angry. The goal is to make you fluent. Because once you can see the levers, tax systems, debt systems, money systems, you stop arguing with shadows. You start making smarter decisions inside the world as it actually is. So let's start where all of this really begins. Not with paper money, not with banks, but with rulers, armies, and a very old question. How do you fund a state without causing a revolt? Let's go back to an empire that thought it had cracked the code. Ancient Rome ran on soldiers, roads, and a promise. The state would be strong enough to protect trade and keep order. That strength wasn't free. Armies needed pay, grain had to be moved, and officials needed salaries. Rome collected taxes, sure, but it also relied on something easier than raising taxes in public. It changed the money. When people say governments print money, it sounds like a modern thing, but the basic idea is ancient. Roman leaders sometimes reduced the amount of precious metal in coins while keeping the coin's face value the same. On paper, it's the same coin. In your hand, it looks the same, but in real value, it's lighter. That gap helped the state fund itself without announcing a new tax rate. And here's the sneaky part. It doesn't feel like a bill arriving at your door. You just notice bread costs more. Over time, that pattern repeats across history. Kings debase coins. Governments issue paper backed by promises. Central banks manage the supply of money. The specific tools change, but the incentive stays consistent, funding big obligations without direct political backlash. Now, money isn't the only lever. If money is one engine, debt is the other. Debt isn't automatically evil. In fact, it can be one of the most useful inventions in economics. It lets governments fund long projects, roads, ports, education, recovery after disasters, without demanding all the cash today. But debt also creates a permanent pressure. Interest. Once a government takes on significant debt, it must keep paying interest year after year. That creates a strong incentive to keep borrowing, especially when borrowing feels easier than raising taxes or cutting spending. And if the debt grows faster than the economy, the government starts hunting for ways to manage the burden. Historically, there are only so many ways out. One way is growth. Build a stronger economy so the debt feels smaller relative to national income. Another is higher taxes. Direct, visible, unpopular. Another is spending cuts. Also visible, also unpopular. And another is inflation, the quiet one. Inflation is like a silent editor that changes the meaning of your money while you're still reading the sentence. If prices rise, then the money a government owes in the future is worth less in purchasing power. That can make big debts easier to carry. But for regular people, inflation can feel like you're running on a treadmill that slowly speeds up. Your salary may increase, but does it increase at the same pace as rent, food, transport, school fees, fuel? That's the real fight. And inflation isn't always deliberate. Sometimes it's caused by real shocks: war, supply shortages, droughts, energy spikes, banking crises. But the reason people feel trapped is that the system often reacts in ways that protect the engine first. Stability, credit, the financial system, while households feel the shock directly. Now let's talk taxes, because taxes are where the design choices become very real. Historically, the easiest taxes to collect are the ones you can't avoid. If you're a medieval farmer, the Lord takes a portion of grain. If you're a city merchant, you pay at the gate when goods enter. If you're a modern worker, taxes come out before the money even hits your account. These systems aren't random. They exist because governments prefer reliable revenue. This is why consumption taxes have been so common for so long. In many places, taxes on salt, alcohol, and everyday goods were major revenue sources. Why? Because everyone buys them. That's the point. Even today, sales taxes and VAT-style systems are popular in many countries because they are broad, steady, and hard to escape. But here's where the keep you broke feeling can show up. Consumption taxes often hit ordinary people harder than the wealthy because a larger share of a low or middle-income household's money goes to spending. If you have to spend most of what you earn on essentials, you end up paying a higher portion of your income into those taxes, even if the tax rate is the same for everyone. Meanwhile, people with higher incomes can often save or invest more, and sometimes benefit from tax systems designed to encourage investment. Again, not a cartoon plot, an incentive. Governments want capital formation. They want businesses to invest. So they build policies that make investing attractive. That can be good for growth. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you don't feel the growth. You feel the squeeze. Now, let's bring it down to earth with a simple scene you've probably lived. Say you're earning a stable income. You finally decide you'll be responsible. You'll save. You open a savings account. You start putting money aside. You feel proud because you should, but then prices rise over time. The savings rate on your account is tiny. Meanwhile, the cost of rent renewals creeps up. Transport costs climb. Food prices shift. Suddenly, that savings you worked so hard for doesn't feel like progress. It feels like a bucket with a small hole. You're doing the right thing, yet it feels like the world is quietly changing the rules. That's the experience many people describe as being kept broke. Not because you literally can't earn, but because the system is set up in a way where standing still is punished. And the system has reasons for it. Modern economies often prefer people to spend and invest rather than hoard cash. When people spend, businesses earn. When businesses earn, they hire. When they hire, tax revenue increases. Governments and central banks worry about what happens when spending collapses, recessions, unemployment, instability. So the structure of the system naturally leans toward encouraging money to move, which is fine if your income grows with the system. It's brutal if it doesn't. Now let's talk about something most people don't notice until it bites them. The way credit and banking shape your daily options. Historically, credit has always been a power tool. In ancient Mesopotamia, in medieval trade cities, in early modern Europe, credit made commerce possible. But it also created hierarchies. Those who could borrow cheaply grew faster. Those who couldn't pay more stayed smaller or fell behind. That pattern never went away. When a government supports a stable financial system, it often means protecting the ability of banks and markets to function. That helps the entire economy, because if the financial system collapses, everyone suffers. But the side effect is that people who already have assets tend to be better positioned during those cycles. If you own property, inflation can raise the nominal value of that property. If you have investments, markets can rebound. If you have access to low-interest credit, you can buy assets earlier. If you don't have those things, inflation just raises your cost of living. Higher interest rates raise the cost of borrowing. Rent rises as landlords adjust to their own costs. And you feel like the door keeps moving. So what are the tricks, really? They're not always tricks. They're mechanisms. Money supply decisions can quietly change purchasing power. Debt can create pressure that pushes policy toward inflation or taxes. Tax systems can be designed for reliability, sometimes at the expense of fairness. Credit systems can widen the gap between asset owners and wage earners. And all of it is shaped by incentives. Governments seek stability, revenue, growth, and social order, because instability threatens the state itself. But knowing the incentives changes how you see your own life. Instead of blaming yourself for everything, you start separating what's personal from what's structural. You still take responsibility because you should, but you stop being confused about why doing the basics sometimes doesn't feel like enough. Because you're not just playing your personal game. You're playing inside a bigger one. And once you can see the bigger game, you can start making moves that actually match the world you live in, rather than the world you wish it was. So here we are, back in that crowded market. Not the ancient one with sandals and silver coins, your market. The one where your phone buzzes with alerts, where prices change faster than your mood, where you could do everything right and still feel like your money is playing hide and seek. And if there's one thing I hope you take from this story, it's this: most of what hits your wallet isn't random. It's not just life being expensive. It's the result of systems built over centuries to solve a very old problem. How do you fund a state, keep an economy moving, manage crises, and avoid open revolt? That's why these financial levers keep showing up again and again in history. Not because every leader is evil, not because there's a single secret plan, but because incentives are stubborn. Governments need revenue. Economies need stability. People don't like pain. So the tools that survive are often the ones that spread pain quietly, gradually, or indirectly, so it doesn't arrive as a single shocking bill. If you've ever wondered why it's so hard to just save, you're not imagining it. Cash feels safe because it's simple. It sits there, it waits, it behaves. But the modern world doesn't reward money for sitting still. In fact, history suggests that when a system has long-term debt obligations and a growing economy to manage, it quietly prefers that money flows through spending, investment, taxes, credit production. When money stops moving, recessions get uglier, unemployment rises, and the political pressure gets intense. So you, the ordinary person, end up living in a world where stability is often prioritized at the top, and adjustment is felt at the bottom. That's why sometimes it feels like the rules were written for somebody else. And now I'm going to drop the controversial statement, one that will probably annoy some people and make others nod so hard their neck hurts. Here it is. Inflation is the most politically convenient tax in history because it can reduce what governments owe while quietly reducing what your money can buy, and it rarely needs your permission. Let me be careful with that, because this is where people misunderstand each other and start throwing labels. Inflation isn't always intentional. Inflation can come from real shocks: wars, supply disruptions, energy shortages, disasters, bad harvests, financial crises. And plenty of economists would argue that moderate inflation can be a sign of a growing economy, and that the alternative, deflation, can be worse. All of that can be true, but the controversial part is the incentive structure. Historically, when states carry heavy debt burdens, a world with some inflation is often easier to manage than a world where money gains value over time. Inflation can make old debts feel lighter in real terms. And if your income doesn't rise at the same pace as prices, your purchasing power becomes the payment plan you never agreed to. So when people say, "I'm working harder, but I feel poorer," it's not always laziness. Sometimes it's math. Sometimes it's timing. Sometimes it's the system doing what it was designed to do: keep the machine running, while your personal goals get treated like a side quest. Now here's the part where I don't want you leaving this video bitter. Because if history is full of these systems, history is also full of people who learn to adapt. Not by becoming paranoid, not by becoming angry at the idea of government itself, but by becoming financially literate in a way that matches reality. The real power move isn't shouting, "The system is rigged," and going to sleep. The real power move is noticing what the system rewards and then choosing how you want to play. If a system quietly punishes idle cash over long periods, then the question becomes, what do you do with your savings so time doesn't eat it? If taxes are easiest to collect from visible income and spending, then the question becomes, how do you structure your money so you keep more of what you earn legally and responsibly? If credit gives advantage to the people who can access it cheaply, then the question becomes, how do you build trust, stability, and options so you're not always borrowing from a position of desperation? None of these are overnight fixes. And I'm not selling you fantasy. I'm describing a mindset shift. Because once you understand incentives, you stop feeling personally insulted by the economy. You stop blaming yourself for every gap between effort and outcome. You start asking sharper questions. Is my money sitting, or is it working? Am I building skills and income streams that can rise with the cost of living? Am I making decisions based on comfort today or resilience tomorrow? And listen, this doesn't mean you become cold or obsessive. You can be lighthearted about this while still being serious. You can laugh at how absurd it is that you have to think about purchasing power just to buy groceries and still choose to be strategic. That's actually the healthiest posture. Not doom, not denial, just clarity. And clarity is freedom. So here's what I want from you, because this channel isn't a lecture hall, it's a conversation. Drop a comment with your experience. Have you ever saved money and felt like prices move faster than your progress? Have you ever gotten a raise and still felt broke? Have you ever looked at a normal life goal, home, stability, peace of mind, and thought, why does this feel so heavy? Tell me what country you're in, what you've noticed, and what part of the story hit you the hardest. I read the comments, and I'll be in there with you, replying, asking follow-up questions, and reaching out where I can, because I want this channel to feel like a community of people learning the game together, not alone in silence. And if you disagree with my controversial statement, even better, say why. Respectful disagreement is how we sharpen the truth. History itself is debated, and the point isn't to win an argument. The point is to see more clearly, because once you see the levers, money, debt, taxes, credit, you realize something that's both humbling and empowering. You don't control the entire system, but you can control whether the system controls your understanding. And that's where broke really begins or ends, long before the numbers in your account. It begins in what you can see. So keep your eyes open, keep learning, keep your sense of humor, and keep building a life where the rules of the game don't surprise you anymore.